Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. Look, today we're going to completely flip how we view LinkedIn. I know, for a lot of us, it kind of feels like just a digital resume, or worse, a place for endless humble bragging. But today, we're going to see how to actually turn your profile into this incredibly powerful, intentional system for building trust. And the best part? We're going to do it without ever sounding fake or overly promotional. I really want you to let this quote sink in for a second. LinkedIn is not where you shout the loudest, it is where you become easier to trust. I mean, that is basically our core thesis for today. We've got to shift our mindset away from that icky feeling of self-promotion right off the bat. It's not about hype, it's not about inventing some fake persona. It's about professional legibility. Basically, making it as easy as humanly possible for the right people to understand exactly what you bring to the table. And to do that, we need to talk about what a trust signal actually is. Okay, think of LinkedIn like the front desk of a really well-run organization. Most people might never actually walk into the back office to see the day-to-day work, right? But that front desk quietly sets the tone for the entire experience. Your LinkedIn presence does the exact same thing for you. Just like a receptionist, your profile forms the first clear indication of who you are, what you know, and whether someone should trust you. All before you even send a single message. Now, what's really interesting about this next slide is how it breaks down part one, the trust signal shift, moving beyond the digital resume. See, a traditional digital resume just lists your past jobs and basic facts. It's looking backward, but a trust signal, that is entirely different. It looks outward. It acts almost like an answering machine for all those silent questions bouncing around in a recruiter's or a client's mind. When they land on your page, they aren't just reading bullet points. They're actively trying to figure you out. And these are the specific silent questions they're asking. Can this person actually do the work? Do they understand their field? Do they communicate clearly? And honestly, would I feel confident reaching out to them? Here's the absolute kicker. If your signals are unclear, people are just going to fill in the gaps themselves. And human nature being what it is, when people have to guess, they usually guess cautiously. They hesitate. Which brings us to part two, patterns over self-promotion. We're de-jargoning the whole personal brand concept here. Look, a personal brand isn't some corporate buzzword. It's really just the pattern behind the signal. Think about your favorite neighborhood restaurant. You probably couldn't recite their entire menu from memory, right? But you remember the pattern. You know if it's super reliable, or casual and quick, or maybe it's pricey but totally worth it. Your LinkedIn presence works the exact same way. People absolutely do not need your full life biography. They just need a stable, reliable impression of what to expect from you. And this brings us to a super fascinating contrast. Identity is who you are. Your brand is how you are understood. You might be a deeply strategic, super thoughtful person. That's your identity. But if your LinkedIn presence is vague, literally no one can see that thoughtfulness. Personal branding is not an ego trip, I promise. It is simply communication. Think of it like a flashlight shining in a dark room. It doesn't magically create new objects. It just selectively reveals the parts of your experience that matter most for the opportunities you're chasing right now. Let's actually break down how this works in practice. There is a massive difference between a slogan, which is just what you say about yourself, and a signal, which is what people can actually verify. So your headline signals where you fit. Your about section, that signals how you think. Your experience proves what you've actually done. And your activity, so your posts and comments, that signals what you notice, what you value, and how you handle other people's ideas. Slogans sound confident, sure, but signals feel real. Imagine walking into a store, and the sign outside says fresh and high quality, but inside, the shelves are completely dusty, and it's a total mess. You'd turn right around. People trust what they can observe, not what's just claimed on a billboard. On LinkedIn, your brand isn't built by just announcing how great you are. It's built when your story and your visible evidence perfectly match up. All right, let's move to and see how this builds into part three layers of trust, the anatomy of a strong signal. Trust on this platform definitely doesn't come from just one impressive detail. It comes from 3 layers working together, kind of like connected gears. First, you've got your profile, which is your translation layer. It tells people what you're all about. Second is your content, which is your evidence, showing how you actually operate. And third is consistency. That's what proves your signal is stable, turning those individual signals into a real, solid reputation over time. Let's zoom in a bit on that second gear, content. Useful content isn't just a random thought thrown into the void. It is a literal trace of your thinking process. When you share a viewpoint, people learn what you believe. When you explain a pattern, they see exactly how you think. And when you use examples, they see what you've learned. Content is just incredibly powerful because it takes your invisible internal qualities and turns them into visible public behavior. And hey, remember, sharing content doesn't mean you have to act like you know absolutely everything. Actually, doing that usually weakens trust. You just need to show thoughtful judgment. It's simply the place where your thinking becomes visible to the outside world. But what happens when this whole system breaks down? Well, that leads us to part 4, the weak signal trap. Why confusion creates hesitation. When people encounter weak signals on your profile, they hit the brakes. Now keep in mind, a weak signal isn't necessarily a bad signal, it's just an unclear one. But it forces the reader's brain to work way too hard to figure out what you're actually about. And as we learned earlier, uncertainty creates hesitation. So what does this look like? A weak signal happens when, say, a profile lists absolutely everything you've ever done, but says nothing specific. Trying to say everything makes you say nothing. It's a classic trap. So the crucial point is, the goal is not to appear perfect, but to become legible. People need to be able to read your signal without any effort whatsoever.
Okay, let's bring all of this together now. Part 5, making your value legible, the system in practice.
Because ultimately, professional presence is just making your strengths easy to believe, period. We're moving from simply understanding these abstract parts of the system to actually making them work for us on purpose. Let's imagine a recent grad who's trying to land a strategy role. If their profile just says hardworking, well, that tells us pretty much nothing. But if they highlight the intersection of research and business, if they break down real reports in their posts, and if they show careful thought in their comments over time, suddenly they are infinitely easier to place in the mind of a recruiter. They didn't claim to be a genius, they just made their value recognizable. And this really highlights the ultimate paradigm shift we are making today. We are completely moving away from loud promises and self-promotion and moving toward patterns. A promise is just words. A pattern is a verified match between what you say, what you show, and how you act over time. You seriously don't need to be louder than everyone else. You just need your signals to harmonize. And this brilliantly illustrates the deepest mental model of this entire explainer. People trust patterns way more than promises. Trust is built by pattern matching, not by empty hype. Once you really get this, LinkedIn stops looking like this stressful performance stage, and it starts looking like a purposeful, highly effective signal system. Which leaves us with one final essential question. Now that you know you are completely in control of the pattern, what kind of signal are you building for the opportunities you want? Because you have the tools to shape perception through clarity right now. Take a look at your profile today, not as a dusty old resume, but as a dynamic trust system, and ask yourself what pattern you are really revealing to the world. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.